Hey, thanks, Ray. Welcome to Talk About the Passion, episode 65, Fire on High. First of all, this is the first episode since July of 2020. It was a challenging year for many of us, but here we are, 2021. I'm happy to be here. I hope you're happy to be here. Before I get into this episode's guest, I thought I would mention I am changing a few things about this podcast. The first one is I am going to try to focus most of the episodes here on punk and hardcore, metal and underground music of that ilk. Maybe some hip hop, since there is, much history between those two genres. As much as I love, Steely Dan or whatever, I don't think anyone wants to hear me talk about them for 3 hours if, they just listen to an entire episode where I talk about the first 3 Biohazard records or something. Actually, that's a good idea. Or maybe they do. As I've done in past episodes with my friends Brian and Guy, I will also be doing more episodes focused on one artist. I have a few good ones on 2 classic hardcore bands in the works so far. And, if you're an expert or, ultra fan of a band and you want to nerd out about them on here, send me a message. I'm hoping to do one on the Dead Kennedys and JFA, Youth of Today. So if you're a huge fan of those bands, hit me up. Okay, then. Today's guest is Damien Moyal. I've known him as a friend online for a few years now and, realized he would make a great guest here. He's sang in a number of great bands like As Friends Rust, Culture, Morning Again, and, of course, started Shai Alud in 1995 and left that band shortly after they were signed to Revelation. I named this episode after the Electric Light Orchestra song. I name all these episodes after songs. This one seemed to work mainly because we talked about ELO, but that's about it. I try not to think too much into that, the titles of these. His project, Damien Done, is my favorite of his work. The vocals and lyrics on there are just really cool and moody and dark, and just another one of those instances where, someone from hardcore music goes on and does something completely different and actually pulls it off, and it's good, and, there's a lot of earworms there. On this episode, we talk about his backstory, getting into music, as well as his various projects throughout the years. Of course, with any of these newer episodes, we talk about life as a creative person during the pandemic and that kind of thing. And then we get into when you can separate the artist from the person, and there's been a lot of those kind of stories lately. This was a great conversation, and, he's, of course, welcome back here anytime. You can listen to his music and buy it on his Bandcamp page under the name Damien Done, and that's DAMIENDONE. If you like this podcast, please like and subscribe and all that. Follow me on social media, Instagram and Facebook. I try to update those when things are happening. And yeah, thanks for listening. Here we go with episode 65, Fire on High. All right, well, I am here with Damien Moyal. Did I pronounce your last name correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
Moyal.
Okay.
Has many pronunciations.
Thanks for doing this. And so you're in Michigan, is that correct?
Yeah,
okay.
Ann Arbor.
Okay, cool. And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Miami, Florida.
Yeah.
Well, at least I guess I got to Miami when I was 7. Before that, I was in Columbus, Ohio for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
While my dad was in school there. And then before that, the first couple of years, I was in the Netherlands.
Right.
Born there before coming over here.
Yeah. And as a kid in Miami, is that where you discovered music? Or
yes.
Before that, yeah. How did you do that?
I guess there was always music on in the house, mm-hmm. which I guess I figured was just part of, I don't know, parenting or something. My parents listened to a lot of, my dad was mostly into like jazz and blues, and he's French. So a lot of like French kind of singers, Gainsbourg, Edith Piaf, stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
He didn't really get into rock too much. My mom was kind of the rocker, I guess, if you would consider ELO in Chicago, the Stones, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that was always on. There was always music, but I think I first started paying attention really just to the radio, to I guess like rock stations. And then I think early on I got the bug with I liked, I don't know, rock and roll just appealed to me from the onset, just because it was, somewhat taboo or dangerous.
Right.
So I gravitated toward it, I guess.
Did bands like, because like ELO in Chicago, those are kind of, they're rock bands, but a lot of it's like more orchestrated and that kind of thing. So did that like influence you at all, or did you sort of go back and see who they got influenced by? And like ELO is kind of like a Beatles, a weird.
ELO's very Beatles. Yeah. I think Jeff Lynne's pretty open about that too. Shamelessly so. I don't know that it influenced me in anything that I've done since, mainly just because I wouldn't even know how to think like that or write like that. But those are, ELO definitely stuck with me. Chicago didn't.
Right.
Aside from memories of the album covers, like in my mom's, stack of records, I don't really remember or know much about Chicago, to be honest.
Yeah. My parents had those records too, and I remember the same thing. Just they were all named after numbers, like Chicago, and then there was the chocolate one, and I knew some of the hits, like Saturday in the Park, and 25 or 6 to 4, and that kind of stuff. But then they got pretty terrible in the 80s. But I've never gone back to that stuff. But ELO, however, I was kind of into their hits as a kid, and then when I went back and realized sort of what was going on with that stuff, you're kind of blown away how he put a lot of that stuff together. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think what also did it for ELO, well, besides the fact that I don't really recall my mom playing the Chicago records very much. I just remember them being in there.
Right.
ELO got played a lot. New World Record was a big album in the house, and then with Traveling Wilburys, there was that sort of like resurfacing of Jeff Lynne. In my young brain, where I was like, all right, this guy's making moves. Like he's not a Dylan or an Orbison, but he's obviously pretty revered, in those circles. So props to Jeff Lynne.
Yeah. Do you remember the first sort of record that you fell in love with, like that you got yourself and fell in love with?
The first record I got so there were records that I would take from my parents' collection and sort of borrow and listen to in my room for a while. I always had like those little, combo stereos with a record player.
Right.
Or so for a while I was borrowing theirs. I remember I was in some in second grade, I was in some program where they had some music class where the teacher would like give us 45s.
Oh, nice.
And so the first records that were like truly mine it came from school. And I remember there was a B-52s 45. I can't remember what it was from. Mm-hmm. There was one that was the group is called Karma. They had a song called Nothing to Do with the Dog.
Okay.
It was pretty like, I don't know, like I don't remember it too well, but it felt like kind of sort of avant-garde, weird, quirky, new wave kind of stuff.
Right.
And then a Philip Bailey record. I think those were ones that I acquired. So they were mine. They didn't come from my parents' collection, but I can't say I loved any of them.
Right.
The first one that I chose, like, of my own free will, for a birthday, it was like, all right, let's go to the record store and you can pick. I think I got a new record player that year. So this was like the accompanying gift,
Yeah.
Let's go
out.
Right. Was Van Halen 1984, right when it came out, because I had just seen Jump on this like giant screen at a roller skating rink, and that made quite an impression. David Lee Roth.
Oh yeah.
Doing splits in the air while roller skating. So that was kind of the rock radio kind of starting to get into like the stuff that was a little more current, maybe slightly dirtier, more dangerous. And then I remember, like, at one point, probably around the same time, or a year or so later, I remember calling the radio station.
Yeah.
As a kid, just sort of like grabbing the phone and called, and I got through, and I was like, "Can you play some Ozzy?"
Yeah.
I think because I had heard like Ozzy Osbourne was a Satanist or something.
Right.
So I was like, "Well, that's awesome. Like, let's hear some Ozzy."
Right.
And I think they played like "Flying High Again" or something, and I felt seen. I was
like, you
wow.
found your tribe.
Yeah,
it's funny. I saw him on Dire of a Madman when I was, I guess, 12. That was one of the first shows my parents let my brother and I go to without them. Right after Randy Rhoads died, and they didn't have they ended up getting the guy from Night Ranger, but there was another guy in between named Bernie Torme that filled in. But anyway, I remember leaving that concert, and I was just about to turn 13, and this is 1982, I guess, and people are streaming out of the place, and there's a guy with no shirt on, and this is at the Boston Garden, and this guy just there was a light bulb hanging bare, and this guy smashed it, and everyone in the hall was like, "Woo!" And I just remember thinking, I found my I found my tribe here, and and then it became a burnout after that.
Yeah.
But so how did you end up finding punk rock from that?
Well, I think from there, I guess around like the end of elementary school, which was I think it's different everywhere. Like 6th grade was still in our elementary school. I think it's in like middle schools, but around then I had a friend, Scott, who I'm not really sure. He was an only child, so I'm not really sure where he got this influence, but he was a little more like hip to music stuff than anyone else I knew.
Right.
And I remember him showing me like some thrash stuff. So like through him, I started I was like, all right, the stuff on the radio, this like, Van Halen, all that stuff is like, it's great. I'm ready for something else. And that I kind of got pulled into, Anthrax, Metallica, Slayer, Sodom, and a bunch of like really bottom shelf kind of dollar bin bands that I would kind of just drop a buck on, with my fingers crossed. Wrathchild America, stuff like that. And then I think around the same time, I was kind of peripherally aware of punk rock.
Yeah.
I think my understanding of it then was pretty limited to like, aside from like, some very vague awareness of like Dead Kennedys, it was basically it was a British thing in my mind.
Yeah.
So it was inaccessible,
Yeah, of course.
I think maybe the first punk band that I ever heard was the Sex Pistols, but even that it felt entirely unrelatable to me. I mean, I guess I liked, how I liked the irreverence, but it felt, even then, even in, by then this was like 7th grade, the shock value felt like a little bit absurd.
Yeah.
To me. And then, so yeah, I stuck with like metal.
Right.
And then I remember, in 7th grade, this is back when like you would just pour over, metal magazines and kind of just, you're like a sponge at that age. You're just absorbing everything, right?
Yeah.
You have this, and we're probably still like this because maybe it's just how we're wired, but like you always have this awareness of like bands that you've not heard yet, may never even get around to hearing, but you kind of know more than you should about them anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, Candlemass, who's, became one of my favorite bands later, was on my radar like 2-3 years before I ever heard him.
Yeah.
Even down to, like knowing like Messiah Marcullin's name and, just from those magazines.
Yeah.
But those magazines would have, in the back, I don't know if you remember, there was always like this 2-page spread that had tiny little thumbnail images of all these like shirts you could order. It was a 2-page catalog.
Yep.
I remember I would study, all that stuff, like cover to cover. And I remember on those things seeing like mixed in there, amongst the like, Slayer and Metallica stuff, you would occasionally see, well, for me, it was Exploited and Corrosion of Conformity.
Yeah. Okay.
I remember seeing like the COC skull, and I was in love, because there was a shirt and there was a ring, that you could order.
Oh, wow.
With like spiky skull. And I was just like, fuck, I need to know. I gotta hear Corrosion of Conformity, because like I already love them, and this is gonna get weird if I like don't ever hear them.
Right.
So I remember, given that time in my life, probably Shoplifting.
Yeah.
Eye for an Eye, and Exploited's Let's Start a War, kind of around the same time.
Yeah.
So 7th, and that was a weird sort of crossroads, I guess, because I remember distinct. I mean, Exploited was like, you saw the Mohawk. In my mind, I guess I knew that was punk. They were British. There was a Mohawk.
Right.
But it didn't sound comical.
Yeah.
Especially that album. I mean, later I would go on to like hear earlier stuff, and I was like, all right, they're kind of hilarious. But that's a dark album, and then An Eye for an Eye was like totally threw me for a loop, because I was like, my frame of reference, if it wasn't punk, and because it was American for starters.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is not punk rock. There are solos. It had this like Sabbathy sort of bluesy kind of thing, and there was like, the Green Manalishi cover.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? This is just like the worst metal band.
I know, right?
Was like all I could surmise.
Yeah.
It was just bad metal.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And I remember the photos too, just really throwing me for a loop, because I was like, they don't even have long hair.
Yeah, I know. And they're dressed in like
mohawks.
Yeah, and they're dressed in like normal clothes and
yeah. And I just remember like, I was like, this is something else. I didn't know which bucket to put it in.
Right.
But it kind of, I guess in my mind, it created this like third bucket.
Right.
And then I remember, kind of from there, I guess I remember hearing, and where did it go from there? I guess Minor Threat.
Yeah.
Which was, I had a request. My friend Jessica was having a birthday party.
Yep.
I was grounded. My parents were going to make an exception, let me go to this party, but I couldn't go to the mall to get a gift for her with my mom.
Yeah.
I was like grounded enough that like I had to, stay home while she went and got it.
Yeah.
But I remember asking Jessica like what she wanted, and she said Minor Threat, Out of Step.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, Mom, Minor Threat, Out of Step. So, and she brought it back, and I remember like looking at it, and I ended up giving it to her without the cellophane on it because I opened it up and taped it.
Yeah.
And then wrapped it.
Right.
And yeah, and from there, well, I remember like pictures of Ian Mackay, just like the shaved heads, the whole aesthetic was like, all right, I was starting to connect dots, you know, it felt COC adjacent maybe, without sounding like them.
Yeah.
And I must have had like, you know, skinhead culture just somehow on the radar, because in my mind I was like, it's skinhead music.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is skinhead music. And then from there it was like this, you know, the floodgates opened, and I was like suddenly aware of Agnostic Front, Black Flag, Meatmen, 7 Seconds, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which was still to me like skinhead music.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it wasn't, you know, British, snotty British punk about the Queen, and it wasn't metal, and it was skinhead music. And then I remember, I think the first time that I became really aware of the term hardcore would have been, I guess, with Agnostic Front, or with The Way It Is.
Yeah. Oh, okay. The Revelation comp.
Yeah, which sort of like closed a loop for me, because with like Breakdown, suddenly it was like, oh, we're getting heavy again.
Yeah.
I got taken on this weird little tangent into like absurd Meatmen stuff, and you know, melodic 7 Seconds-y stuff, and Flag, which like I couldn't tell what they were doing from one release to the other. You know,
right. Yeah, as a kid, they were hard to. I loved them, but they were hard to grasp. Especially, you know, I came in a little later, so you know, so those later ones, you know, I learned to like them later, but yeah, they were on just this weird trip that I never really got until I was older. So.
Yeah, because you don't really have a lay of the land or understand like the order of the releases.
Yeah, exactly.
And you don't necessarily have an appreciation yet for some of the stuff that they were experimenting with.
Yeah. I just finally got into the that Process of Weeding Out album recently. I was like, you know, some of I played it and I was like, some of these instrumentals are actually pretty good. And I think I posted something on social media, and half of my friends shit all over. But anyway, maybe I was messed up and just, but I kind of got it a little semi recently. But at the time, it was just So with Minor Threat, were you identifying with like the lyrics or anything? Like, so straight edge wasn't like really a thing, really at that point but did you read into the lyrics on that record at all?
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
Big time. Yeah. That was, I mean, Minor Threat was like, even with Eye for an Eye, which by then was completely just ingrained in, you know, cause I was an only kid too. And I, you know, come to think of it, grounded a lot.
Yeah.
So I just remember like, you know, every
music. Yeah.
Yeah. Every millimeter of the J card, you know, but it didn't speak to me at all.
Right.
I loved the sound and the look and the aesthetic, but I couldn't tell you today, you know, what early COC was about, because that also seemed to change from album to album.
Yeah.
But yeah, Minor Threat was the first time where I was like, all right, here we go. This is like, these are other suburban American kids that are just like pissed off at adults who aren't taking them seriously, and pissed off at kids that they think are like fucking it up for everyone, and just pissed off at, you know, people who don't listen, and people who, you know, just it was prose.
Yeah, it was perfect for like for teenagers that, like you said, like were spent a lot of time alone, especially that record. It's not really, I think the 7-inches are more of like the straight edge, where that one was more, just it was more personal and emo almost, and think again, look back and laugh.
Yep.
Little friend. But
yes, it was so relatable.
Yeah,
so relatable.
Yeah,
and Metallica's not.
Yeah, exactly. Creeping death. I mean, it's a cool story, but I'm not.
Yeah, and that was the thing too. And I always felt like metal. There was this theatrical element that it was cool. It was cool for a minute.
Yeah.
But it definitely was not relatable, and I feel like metal is really predicated on bands lord over the audience.
Yeah.
It's you're watching gods,
yeah.
up on this like big pyrotechnic sort of like platform, and then again, and the British stuff was like, I don't know, I don't live there, I don't really know anything about Maggie, Margaret Thatcher,
right? Yeah,
or the Queen.
Yeah, just seemed like those punk rockers just hung out and took pictures of themselves in leather jackets and spit. And that was sort of my impression of that world.
Yeah, and then a commonality with metal was like the costumery.
Yeah.
It was like very looky.
Yeah.
And at that age, like, I don't know, my parents weren't about to let me walk out of the house in any of that shit, like on either side of the aisle.
Yeah.
So enter Minor Threat into my awareness, and it was like, oh fuck, and they're in t-shirts and jeans, and like, and they're not lording over the audience. In fact, like, this dude is in the audience.
Yeah.
He's just surrounded by a bunch of other, bald heads.
Yeah.
And it just, like, everything about it just felt like it was like, for me, it could be me, it could be like my friends in the neighborhood at my school, and it sort of was, because right around the same time that same friend, Jessica, had, there was a band that played that party, actually. Friends of ours and friends that I would later end up like doing my first band with, had a band called Midget Stew, and they did Minor Threat cover.
Nice.
So yeah, and so it all just felt like very like, okay, cool. This is like, these are just like kids like us, who skateboard like us. Well, not me, but friends. And it was just it was exactly what I needed at that point in my life, I guess.
And do you remember the first show, the hardcore show that you went to?
I don't remember the first. I went to a couple of local shows.
Yeah.
The first like notable hardcore show that I can remember, like the first time the first, like, I would say, like national act, touring band that I was like, stoked for would be, well, besides maybe like, no, I guess that was later. I remember seeing Big Drill Car pretty early on.
Oh, nice.
Sick of It All. And I remember I listened to the episode that you did with EK.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I think he mentioned the new Titans of Block
that tour. Yeah.
Yeah. So that tour, when it came through Miami,
nice.
which was Napalm Death, Sacred Reich, Sick of It All, and Sepultura.
Yeah. What a tour, huh? Like, when you think back at that lineup now, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. It was crazy. And that was kind of like right around when, like, I was like fully, I guess because of the way it is comp.
Yeah.
Now I understood, like, that this bucket had a name, and its name was hardcore.
Yeah.
And I guess I started like getting kind of pulled more toward New York. My attention drifted to New York, I guess. Yeah. Because like I was saying, it kind of closed a loop for a metal kid, where it was like, oh, this is like heavier and harder.
Yeah.
We're moving away from these like suburban skateboarding DC kids and into like some shit that kind of feels a little more chunky.
Yeah.
Which I liked, but at the same time I always kind of had a soft spot for like Discord stuff or hardcore with melody in general. But yeah, so, and then when Sick of It All came through, it was kind of I guess I was all in.
Now, so you must have recognized then, like, at these shows and just hardcore in general now, you were, like you were saying before, like heavy metal people, you know, there was no chance you're ever going to meet Bruce Dickinson, or he's never going to be standing in the crowd, you know, watching the opener Great White next to you or something. But hardcore shows, everyone was just there, and everyone sort of was part of it, you know, including the band. So that must have been attractive to you as a young kid.
Yeah, it was attractive. And it was like that idea was really supported aesthetically, you know, like the pictures reinforced that idea, the lyrics reinforced that idea, especially when you're like, you know, it's like, you know, punks and skins, blacks and white, you know, like there's like this whole we're all just kids together, and we gotta, you know, unify. And I was like, and then gang vocals too, just this sort of, I don't know that anyone ever really talks about kind of the psychological impact maybe of gang vocal, not in like a ridiculously kind of blown out Biohazard slash Strife Biohazard kind of way, but like in just that whole like oh man, I can hear, like, you can tell those are their friends yelling in the studio.
Yeah.
And it just made the whole thing so accessible and attainable. And I think I just, that kind of sealed the deal for me. Yeah. It was less pretense or maybe different kind of, you know, I don't know.
Yeah. And then, so as far as playing music, when did that start for you? So what years are we talking about now? Like, I guess that Sick of It All tour was what, 89 or no?
That was
91 or something. I don't even remember.
I think 91.
Yeah, 91.
That was 91. So yeah, so I guess by the time I started like really being kind of a regular part of shows was shortly before then. You know, it was like a couple local shows than that, and then it was like, all right, now I'm going to be a participant and not just a kid who, you know, dubs his friends' tapes or shoplifts. You know, So around then was when the band from the Party Midget Stew. They broke up, and one of the drummer asked me one day if I wanted to sing for their new band, and I didn't have any kind of resume at the time, but I did have a shaved head.
Yeah.
So I think I qualified, I guess.
Yeah.
There were not very many punks or hardcore kids or skaters or whatever in the school at all.
Right.
So started singing with them, and that was called US Decline.
Yeah.
And it was very straightforward, kind of 3-chord, you know, hardcore punk with an emphasis on punk, I guess.
Yeah.
And it was cool. It was fun. Never played. And then this was right around the time that I left home. I left home at 15, in December of 91, I believe. Mm-hmm. And I ended up spending the next few years, especially the year that followed, kind of away a lot, institutionalized, or whatever. Right. Anyway, I had to leave. Right. So I told those guys, you know, carry this torch, you know, without me. You know, we had only practiced like 5 times in a bedroom, so there was no torch. But they ended up getting a singer, and they recorded a demo. And I remember when I came back around, hearing the demo, and then I became sort of the unofficial, the drummer, and a couple of those other guys started a label, sort of it was a label called Pathetic Records, PR.
Yeah.
They kind of only did tape releases of local bands, and then they had there was a venue called the PR House that was kind of an illegal. It was a space above a carpet shop.
Oh, okay.
That we somehow had access to, and so the PR House became a venue. There was Pathetic Records, the label, and then they also did a zine called like Idiot Nation, and I. Because I had lost my spot as the singer, I kind of became sort of the resident like doodler, like illustrator for flyers and zine stuff. And then I started a second band called Insist.
Yeah.
And then one of those guys went on to be in a couple bands on Doghouse Records, a band called like Sunday Driver, and some other stuff. I remember him exposing me also to a lot more kind of like straight edge hardcore.
Yeah. Okay.
Alex. And then after Insist, did a band called Reach with a couple people from a band called Organized Pain that PR had put a tape out of, and that Organized Pain included on guitar John Wiley, who I would later end up being in Culture and Morning Again with.
Oh, right. Yep.
So just kind of small little neighborhood scene that sort of gave way to whatever bands led me, I guess. Ultimately, it was kind of just a hobby for me. I had no intention of really being a singer.
Right.
I remember like Reach played a show in a cul-de-sac once, and Insist played one or two shows at the PR House, and it was cool. I had fun, but I don't know. I didn't really know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And then at some point I got an invite to come try out for Culture, and that sort of just changed everything.
Yeah. And that was what kind of hardcore band was that?
So Culture was, well, I'd seen them playing, I think once, and I really dug it, and I had the demo, and I loved it. And John Wiley was playing for them at this point, and I think he was the one that said like, we need a singer. And I was also kind of in recovery. Like falsely accused, but nonetheless, like I had been, in places that were rehabby, and I had social workers, and I was kind of court mandated to do 90 and 90 and all that, all that stuff.
Yep.
So in my mind at that point, I was like, oh man, I can't drink or like get high or anything again, because I'll die on the spot.
Yeah.
And none of that was true. I had just like, a kid who had a propensity for getting in trouble and making dumb decisions, and also just a kid. So I was just like getting fucked up.
Yeah.
But I bought it. So at the time when I joined, I tried out for Culture. They were doing this like, a sort of a brand of 90s hardcore that I wouldn't really realize was super 90s until later.
Right.
But it was very, I guess, like influenced by other stuff of the era, because most of the guys in the band were and still are several years older than me. So like they had their ear to the tracks.
Oh, right. Yeah.
In ways that I didn't. So they were aware of bands that were not yet on my radar, like Case and Mean Season, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think that in retrospect, I came to realize like, okay, Culture's at least the earlier stuff was very influenced by Snapcase and Mean Seed, like earlier Snapcase.
Yeah, right. That wave of hardcore.
Yeah, and also probably new age bands and all that kind of stuff. So it was metallic, but much less so than I would later realize.
Mm-hmm.
I think at the time, when you're listening to it against, like, Side by Side or something,
right.
you're like,
yeah,
man, I'm in the most metal hardcore band that ever lived.
Yeah.
We're like Slayer.
Right.
And then later you hear Overcast or
right.
something, and you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
No, we're but yeah, it was early on. It was like very kind of bass centric, long meandering melodic, pretty kind of intros and songs that were way too long and had way too many parts. And but it changed everything for me, because it was the first time that I remember I got in the band, and they were like, we're recording in a week and a half at the first practice.
Yeah.
They told me that. So I had to learn 7 songs and write 3 songs in like 10 days. And once I went into the studio and was able to like walk around listening to this tape that I was on my Walkman, that sort of just changed everything.
Yeah.
I was like, oh shit, I can be, like, it's not just like this music appeals to me because I'm a kid like the kids in these bands.
Right.
I can be a kid in these bands.
Yeah.
Like for real, and have a tape or a CD or whatever.
And so you're singing someone else's lyrics for some of those songs, and then you wrote some yourself for that.
Yeah. Well, we attempted that album 3 times. We went into the studio on 3 separate occasions and recorded 3 entirely different. The one that happened 10 days after I joined was 7 of the songs Rich had written, the guitarist, and then I wrote the other 3.
Okay.
So it was 7 and 3. Then, for whatever reason, we didn't like that one. We went back a month or so later and recorded. The selection changed, and I remember it was like 5 and 5, because we now have a couple new songs from. Then we scrapped that one, and we did a 3rd version, which is the one that was our only full length. It's called Born of You.
Yeah.
That one came out. That's what was released, and that was like an inversion of the first ratio, where it was like 3 of the songs were still from Rich legacy songs, and then the other 7 were all new.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so, did you start taking lyric writing seriously at this point, or because I the stuff that I've read and the stuff in As Friends Rust, I think is great, and you can tell that you put a lot of work, and it's well thought out and original. Thanks. And so, was that something that you worked on early on?
I think so. I think. I remember putting work into some of the stuff in those early Culture days.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling like it was kind of easy to do, especially once we had fully embraced the vegan straight edge sort of thing,
right.
Because then you get all apocalyptic and biblical. Like, it's like everything's, I took it seriously, but I was also writing about things that were like, they didn't have staying power for me,
right?
And not just because, I'm a sellout. I think even if I was still straight edge, I think some of those lyrics I would just be like, man, do I really have to sing that? No.
Yeah.
Don't we have some other songs we can? Yeah, it was very it was like hyper specialized lyrical content, and that kind of even toward the end, I remember like really sort of opposing that, where I was like, no more songs about veganism or straight edge.
Yeah.
So I was trying to dabble in like, focusing more on just sort of the perils of industry and like unfettered capitalism and how they've got us by the balls with this like bipartisan kind of duopoly and like things like that, and eventually I guess that was when I came back to the band, but I didn't want to, long story short, I didn't want to do the vegan straight edge thing anymore because I'd started becoming aware of hardline bands. I didn't quite know what it was, but I knew the basics, at least the things I didn't like.
Yeah.
And I realized like, shit, everybody thinks that that's what we are.
Right.
It's like, because we have these militant vegan straight edge songs, like people think we're hardline. Like I'm okay with being clumped in with, Earth Crisis or Chokehold, or, like, well, definitely Chokehold, but I was just much more left, I guess.
Yeah.
And it really bothered me. I didn't want to be associated with bands that were hardline, as I understood hardline to be, which was like, basically just pro-life and homophobic, and I was like, nope.
Yeah. What was that? What was that famous one that was on Victory early? Was that they went to like a pro-life, a straight edge band? I can't remember the name of it.
Was on Victory? Was
I thought it was an
Raid?
Maybe.
Raid or Green Rage?
Maybe. Yeah, I thought maybe it wasn't.
I don't know if either of those were on Victory.
Yeah. It was. I remember the album just got panned by everyone because it was. I don't know. I'll have to look it up after if I can see if I can. Not All Out War. It was like a 3-word thing, but that could be any fucking band. One of those 3-word hardcore bands.
Yeah. No, I remember like there was a band called Cannon.
Yeah.
And our guitarist had the 7-inch, and I don't know if I'm like crossing wires or memories, so apologies to anyone in Canon if this is like not you guys, but one of those hardline bands had a song, or at least like liner notes or something in their record went so far as to they were basically like abstaining from masturbation because of the potential lives that you're murdering.
Right.
And I was like, all right.
Yeah.
This is getting fucking out of hand,
Yeah, a little bit, right?
So around then I left Culture and then started Shai Hulud, and then John from Culture, sometime while I was doing Shai Hulud, had also left Culture, and he called me and asked if I wanted to sing for a new band. But he had been one of the people that I had the biggest issues with in the Culture days.
Okay.
Because he was like, no, fuck that. Like, we need to get more militant, like more threatening, more whatever. And I was like, dude, look at me,
Right. Yeah.
Remember, guys, I've been straight edge for like a year.
Right.
I was smoking cigarettes when I tried out for you guys. But going to meetings.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, I don't know. So anyway, he asked me to sing for his new band. And I remember on the phone, which was like where it was like, are we going to bury the hatchet and try to do something new together?
Right.
Since neither of us are in that band anymore.
Yeah.
I said to him, I was like, I'll do it, but it will not be a vegan or straight edge band.
Yeah.
I remember that being kind of a mandate. And then years later, the first couple releases, the ones that I was on, were re-released by a label in Belgium with 3 giant X's under the name. And that happened,
Yeah, of course.
After my watch.
And Shai Hulud, that was a brief. you joined them, and then they got signed to Revelation, and you were gone before that happened.
Yeah, it was maybe a year.
Yeah.
Matt Fox, the only original member that's still, I mean, it's basically his thing.
Yeah.
He and I started it sitting on my living room floor with an unplugged guitar in Matt's hand.
Yeah.
And then played a bunch of shows. We recorded a demo. The demo is what he sent to Rev. He had contacts at Rev because he worked at a record shop.
Yeah.
And they loved it. And there was talk of touring and, you know, all this stuff. And I mean, the idea of being on Revelation was awesome, but it was a very, very difficult, volatile kind of interpersonally. It was like, we just did not get along. A lot of us.
You wouldn't have lasted in a van for months at a time.
There was no way.
Yeah.
There was no way. We all knew it. I knew it. So I left with nobody tried to stop me.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a short thing.
Yeah. And then was it On Bodies after that?
No, from there it was Morning Again.
Yeah.
I guess I was doing the two at the same time for a while.
Yeah.
Then I was down to just Morning Again.
Yeah.
Until the following summer. And then after I got the boot from Morning Again, from John, I think partly because I'm difficult and to be in a band with, but also because I think he did want to kind of get back to the whole, you know, straight edge vegan thing. So whatever, for whatever reason, I was out of that band, and then I was doing. That's when As Friends Rust started. Bird of Ill Omen started, and then right around the same time, I came back to Culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so As Friends Rust was more of a like I hear like Sam I Am in that band, Dag Nasty, that kind of more. Even like Hot Water Music. Were you guys all from Gainesville at that point?
We when the band started in '96, I was still in Miami, well in Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale area by then.
Okay.
And then in '97, I don't know. I guess quit Bird of Ill Omen. As Friends Rust fell apart, there was only Culture left.
Yeah.
That I had recently gotten back into, and we went to Europe. And at that point, I was just like, "All right, I'm in. I'm like all in now on this whole like I just want to tour forever." And they were moving to, or had just moved to Gainesville. So I think after that trip, I came back and basically was like packed my shit and moved to Gainesville.
Yeah, and there was a pretty thriving music scene there at that point, right?
Yeah, not for us.
No.
You know, it was very. It was very. You know, Gainesville.
Yeah.
It was the same Gainesville that it is now was like kind of then too, where it just wasn't a place for a vegan straight edge, metallic, heavy, moshy, chuggy, hardcore band.
Yeah.
But moved up there, and then that was when the idea to like reform As Friends Rust with new people basically came up, because a couple of one of the guitarists of Culture, Steve, who was living with Jason from Hot Water Music at the time. I guess they had been listening to the demo that we had recorded with the first lineup.
Yep.
And really liked it. I think it sounded pretty fresh and different. And it was from Steve from Culture, was like, we should like ask those guys if it's all right if you start a new version.
Yeah.
I want to play those songs and write songs like that.
Nice.
So I did, and they were like, sure, go for it. And then Steve never ended up playing in the band. But that was sort of how a new version came about. And like, yeah.
And you put out a number of records with that band.
Yeah. Well, the following year, Culture fell apart for like in like an irreparable kind of way.
Yeah.
Or like half the band started drinking, basically. So then it was just As Friends Rust for a few years.
Yeah.
For about the next 4, really.
And, yeah. And you guys put a couple songs out earlier this year.
Yeah, earlier this year we did our first new songs since 2002.
Yeah.
So 18 years for the band, but with this particular lineup, there were kind of 3 incarnations of the band. There was like the Miami version.
Yeah.
Then there was the newly reformed version. And then after a couple of years, that sort of fell apart, and we, the guitarist Joe and I, put together like a whole new lineup. Recorded probably more stuff than any of the other lineups.
Yeah.
And then disbanded. Well, I left. They continued for a minute with another singer or two, I think, over the next like few months, and then just ended it.
Right.
But yeah, so with this particular lineup, it's 20 years.
Wow.
Since we've written or released anything, but 18 for the band as a whole.
That's crazy. And was that stuff came out around March, April? Is that when you put those out?
Yeah, I think so.
So you recorded those before bad things started happening.
They recorded all the music before bad things started happening.
Yeah.
I recorded the vocals basically the week that the shit hit the fan.
Right.
In fact, I recorded down in Florida, and my wife and son, like we were all supposed to go and make like a whole vacation out of it.
Okay.
And a few days beforehand was when we started like really, it started hitting that like, oh shit, like people are canceling trips.
Yeah.
And we canceled their flights the night we were supposed to fly in the morning, the night before. And I went alone, and instead of it being a 10-day trip or whatever, I shortened it to just the weekend.
Right.
But I remember like kind of not really fully appreciating the situation when I left, thinking it was kind of ridiculous that they canceled. And
yeah.
just kind of, I was like, I don't know. I think people are overreacting, but 3 days later, I was like ready to rent a car instead of flying back.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe I should just drive back to Michigan.
Right? Yeah.
It's crazy. It was that whatever weekend that was.
Yeah.
When it was like everyone's perception of what was happening
finally hit everyone. Yeah. It was.
Yeah.
It was strange that because the next my job stayed open, except me and one other person there for a number of months. But I just remember that those first couple of weeks driving, it was like desolate. It was really creepy, and but it was also just the air of like the unknown, and here we are thinking, back then thinking, okay, well I guess by the summer this will be dealt with, and and here we are in December, the eve of December, and we're not even close to being over this. So
right. Yeah. I remember in March or April, a couple people just being like, man, this is going to last like 3-4 weeks.
Yeah. I know. Right?
And I was like, no, man, this is going to last like 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
You are way underestimating, and then here we are 9 months later.
Yeah.
Kind of going into a second wave.
Yeah.
Second lockdown.
I wanted to talk about the 2 songs you released with As Friends Rust this year. One of them, Last of the Famous International Scumbags, which I immediately, recognize as a play on the Morrissey song, Last of the Famous International Playboys. And you kind of talk about, artists that, are known to just, say outrageous things or things come out about them. And, where's the line when you separate the art from the artist, and, what influenced you to write that?
I guess just my own personal kind of struggle with what to do, in those situations. Cause I mean, a lot of people are just like, thought it was just a, very literally a dig at Morrissey. And that's
right.
Like, I mean, I like as an artist, like I have a ton of respect for Morrissey. I love the guy's voice.
Right.
I'm a fan.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like with somebody like Cosby.
Yeah, that's an easy
right?
one too.
That's an easy one.
Yeah,
that's an easy one. He's done.
Yeah,
you're fucking finished.
Yeah,
don't come around here.
Yeah,
but then you start getting into like this fuzzy territory where it's like, all right, yeah, I don't like that Morrissey is palling around with, nationalist organizations and he's just saying like really outrageous, shocking, kind of offensive shit.
Right.
But to some extent, isn't he allowed to?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe not the supporting groups that are just like nationalist in a like kind of a like ethno-nationalist kind of way.
Right.
That starts to get a little easier too, where I was like, oh, cool. No, you're a Nazi.
Right. Or if
you
or if you're using your art to convey that message, like Screwdriver, like
right.
If those guys were just a country, a hardcore band, and they just sang about, whatever, straight edge and the government and this and that, but didn't have any racist songs. But we found out, Ian Stewart is a white supremacist. I don't know.
Yeah, you would have less reason to not listen to their music,
right? Right.
And then you start drawing parallels to like, all right, but like, he's supporting groups or ideologies that have like affiliations with some fucked up characters, but like, so do people in our families.
Yeah.
So do people we work with. Yeah. And like, we're not writing them off, even though they support a group or a party or a politician, a leader that is affiliated with all of this, like, offensive, dangerous shit in our minds.
Yeah.
Also, and it's like, I don't know. I don't believe that, I don't think that punk rock or hardcore has to be leftist necessarily.
Yeah.
I don't need everyone to believe the same shit that I do.
Right.
I mean, I think there's a line. There's certain things that I think just sort of like disqualify you,
right,
from hardcore.
Yeah.
Ideologically, but I think like there is a spectrum of like from ranging from really left, sort of progressive leftist kind of ideology to more right, sort of pseudo conservative-y kind of stuff that I think we have to allow. It can't be that like homogenized or whatever. And I think Morrissey is sort of the perfect example of that kind of conundrum, because it's like artistically, I think he's kind of never shown himself to be that kind of ass,
right.
If you look at like
his words,
his influences or artists he's worked with or whatever. But is being offensive and believing in some shit that we don't like enough to just have to write an artist off forever. Which ones do we write off forever? And no, I mean, I'm not going to watch how could you watch an episode of the Cosby Show?
Yeah, no, I know at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's also a range. Like it's, it's one of those things that like, it can't just be this black and white. There are artists or celebrities that like they're done and their body of work can be just fucking just burned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's like the ones in between where like, all right, he's done or she's done or they're done, but the music didn't really reflect that kind of stuff. And I'm still going to listen to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's the whole, like, I don't know, bummer to learn that about, that artist.
Yeah. Yeah. Like Ryan,
but I don't really care that much.
Yeah. Ryan Adams was one of those guys that, I liked some of his stuff. And when I heard about whatever he was getting involved in, it was pretty, kind of bummed me out,
Yeah. And that's another one where, it was like, all right, it's sort of a bummer that you're using your position to kind of get dates.
Yeah.
Right. I guess, but it kind of, I don't know a whole lot about it. I remember I wanted to like really look into it a little bit more, diligently or whatever, do my due diligence. But then I heard the Mandy Moore thing about how
right from
he told me I wasn't a real musician because I don't play guitar. And at that point, I sort of the whole thing just got derailed for me. I was like, he just sounds like a dick in a fight,
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't really know much about it. But yeah, whatever it is, and I don't know if this was like the wrong play, but like it hasn't stopped me from listening to Whiskey Town or
Yeah. And same with like Michael Jackson was one of those sort of on the line where, because he was never really, most of that stuff was like alleged, and so I don't know.
Yeah.
There's certain ones, but it's definitely the song definitely allows for a good conversation. So I was glad you wrote this. It's really cool. So if you're listening to this, you should seek this song out. It's pretty cool.
It was a weird song to tackle too, because it was a fine line to dance, because I didn't want to get pegged as having any real position on it.
Yeah.
Not because of potential backlash so much as I don't. That's the whole point of the song. Is I don't. I wish I had more of a position on it, or I understood it better.
Yeah. You're more telling a story about it, and there's no opinion in it, and I like it. It's definitely it's cool.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. And so, and you're also doing Damien Done. Let's talk about that. So is that a group, or is that more just you doing stuff yourself, or?
It's kind of both, I guess. It's I write the songs. There was an album a couple years ago, Charm Offensive, that I basically just wrote kind of in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Wrote and recorded myself, except for the producer James replayed some of my programmed kind of shitty MIDI bass lines on a real bass. Mm-hmm. And then he added a lot of very important additional guitar stuff as well. But all the keys and the drums and all that stuff was programmed. And then I found some people to play with live who were more than happy to just kind of like, just give us the set and we'll learn it and we'll practice it and we'll play.
Yeah.
So we did that for a while. A couple of recordings like that. And then as we started to build more rapport at practice, it became more of a like, I don't know what the lead should be. Like, is this arrangement? How do you guys feel about this arrangement? Does this feel weird here? Does this need some more kind of guitar stuff?
Right.
And then more room for people to kind of put their stamp on it. And and so it does feel at this point, or at least before the pandemic, it definitely was very much a band. In fact, right before the pandemic, I think in January or February, we recorded a 3-song EP with like the full band.
Yeah.
So that felt like a new chapter, because I wrote the songs, but they definitely put their mark on the songs by adding their own parts and their own flavor, and we kind of worked on them collaboratively, and then recorded them live together, and it was the first recording with the full band.
Yeah.
And then this shit happened, and I kind of went back into like my writing songs on a laptop.
Right.
Aside from the guitarist, because he has recording stuff at home too, so there were a couple. I'm able to email something to him and ask him if he can add, you add something to this part and maybe rip a solo.
Yeah.
Nice. And yeah.
And you must like the free, because this project is not a hardcore project. It's more indie rock, some electronic stuff, and your singing is really cool on this. And but I one of the songs I was checking out that you put out it's like a demos thing from this year called
last week I just kind of wanted to get it out of my computer, basically.
I love that song, Black Moon. It's like this 80s sort of dark wave vibe. It's pretty cool. So thanks. That's like our
first like energetic. A lot of the other stuff is kind of slow and occasionally tedious and dark, and just kind of they crawl along. That's definitely the peppiest song, and
nice. So like going forward, you have obviously people aren't touring right now, so are you writing stuff yourself and trying to record when you have time, or do you?
I am, but like very, very slowly. Aside from those 3 songs and maybe 1 or 2 others, I kind of haven't done a whole lot of songwriting with this pandemic. Which I thought it would be like, oh man, I'm going to be home 6 days a week for the next however many 3-4 months, and I'm going to write so much music, and now it's like 9 months later, and I have found that like it hasn't given me any more free time, especially like there's a 2-year-old, and it's but yeah, I mean, I'm kind of always chipping away at songs, and then As Friends Rust is working on some new stuff too.
And how do you think the future of music is going to be? Like touring wise is going to be, in just live music in general. Like when it eventually comes back, it's going to be. I think it's going to be pretty fucked up.
I hope not. I mean, I think there are people that are like going to be so hungry for it that the minute it's, the consensus is that like, it's safe to go pile into a venue. I think people will be like chomping at the bit to do it. But I don't think that this time away from shows has created any bad habits or habits that are going to be hard to break when doors open again. I mean, nothing. I mean, if anything, it's like, it's probably driving people more to live shows because they're so sick of watching like a screen split into like, for like, a quadrant with musicians from all over the country covering a whatever, a prong song or something. Like everyone's done with that. I think it'll be fine. I think it'll change in kind of some like futuristic ways. Maybe like we'll probably see more like Apple Pay, more like virtual payment kind of things happening at like the merch table. And I think we might see masks just permanently incorporated into
indoors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even like long after a virus, I think there's an awareness that like might be hard for some people to come back from.
Yeah.
Where they're like,
definitely.
yeah, I know it's gone, but like, I'm not trying to give anything else I might have or get anything from. Yeah.
I keep thinking of the logistics of, at one point the country saying, okay, or the world saying, okay, venues are open now. So, we're 700 hardcore bands and metal bands and rock bands and hip hop artists and all going to tour at the same time.
Right.
What's that going to do to venues? And, so it's definitely, that's just one of the millions of challenges that I keep thinking of, But
I have not even thought of that.
Yeah.
And then what's that going to do also to like, when venues are so sought after, they have all the control, right?
Yeah.
That could get interesting. Like the band, like it might just be a much less sort of democratic selection of bands that we're allowed to see, or
booking agents are going to have to start being friendly with each other and that kind of thing to work tours out. It's already kind of like a puzzle for a lot of those guys to put tours together. With finding open dates and in the middle of the week and that kind of thing. So it's definitely going to be a challenge. But
yeah.
Anyway, here we are. Anyway. I appreciate you doing this for me, man. It's been cool chatting with you.
Yeah, same. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah. And I'm gonna put a bunch of these new ones out at the start of the year. So once it goes up, I'll let you know. And So thank you again, and I will talk to you soon, man.
All right. Yeah. Same. Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Bye.